3.5 million years ago, in the tall grass of what is now Florida, a horse is grazing. This is not the horse that you may know. This is the Hipparion, a three-toed ancestor of modern horses, barely the size of a pony. It is nervous. It lifts its head, smelling the wind, twitching its ears. It knows it's being hunted, but it's looking for the wrong thing. It's scanning the ground for wolves or saber-toothed cats. It doesn't look up. Suddenly, the grass explodes. A shadow looms over the horse, blotting out the sun. It stands 8 feet tall. It weighs over 300 pounds, but it's not a mammal. It's a bird. Before the horse can even tense its muscles to run, a beak the size of a fire axe slams down. The strike is vertical, precise, and devastating. The tip of the beak drives into the horse's spine with the force of a falling sledgehammer. The spinal cord is severed instantly. The horse collapses, paralyzed before it even hits the ground. The predator stands over its kill. It doesn't tweet, and it doesn't sing. It lets out a low-frequency rumble that vibrates in the chest of every animal within a mile. This is Titanis walleri. This is a terror bird. And you have just entered the only era in Earth's history where birds ate horses. For 60 million years, the food chain was actually kind of upside down. We are used to a world where cats eat birds, right? But after the dinosaurs died, the planet entered a terrifying experimental phase. Mammals were small, hiding in burrows, terrified of the day. The sky belonged to the birds, but the ground was empty. Evolution abhors a vacuum, so the birds decided to land. They gave up their wings, they grew to nightmare proportions. They seemed to remember that their ancestors were the velociraptor and the T-Rex. These were the Phorusrhacids, colloquially known as terror birds. They were the most efficient biological killing machines nature ever designed between the death of the dinosaurs and the rise of man. They were the apex predators of South America, an isolated island continent where they ruled without question. And they were terrifying because they combined the intelligence and vision of a bird with the brute force of a dinosaur. To understand why these creatures were so lethal, you have to look at the mechanics of their anatomy. They were built for one thing: the surgical application of violence. Let's look at the heavyweight champion of the family, Kelenken guillermoi. Discovered in Argentina, this creature was a monster from a horror movie. Its skull alone was 27 inches long. That's the largest bird skull ever found in the history of the planet. To put that into perspective, the skull of Kelenken is larger than the skull of a horse. It is larger than a human's torso. Attached to this massive skull was a beak that functioned unlike anything alive today. Modern birds of prey, like eagles, use their talons to kill. They grip and squeeze. Terror birds didn't do that. Their feet were small, similar to an ostrich. Their weapon was their face. Paleontologists have performed CT scans on terror bird skulls to analyze the stress points. The results were shocking. The skull was incredibly rigid in the vertical plane, but brittle side to side. This tells us exactly how they killed. They could not bite a struggling animal and hold on, or the thrashing prey would snap the bird's beak. They couldn't shake their prey like a dog does with a toy. So instead, the terror bird operated like a living guillotine. The neck muscles were massive, capable of driving the heavy skull downward with blinding speed. The beak had a hooked tip, sharp as a combat knife. The hunting strategy was brutal and simple. Catch the prey, stand over it, and deliver a vertical hatchet strike to the brain or the spine. One hit, no struggle. This was a necessary adaptation, because the prey animals of the Cenozoic era were evolving. They were getting faster. The terror bird had to end the fight in seconds. If a hunt dragged on, the bird risked breaking its legs, and for a bipedal predator, a broken leg means death. But a giant beak is useless if you can't catch your food, and this brings us to the second terrifying fact about terror birds: their speed. These were no lumbering giants. The bone structure of their legs, specifically the tibiotarsus, shows adaptations for high-speed running. Biomechanical models suggest that Titanis and Kelenken could reach speeds of 40 to 60 miles per hour. That is faster than a racehorse. Like, imagine an ostrich, which is already really fast, now give it the density of a linebacker, the aggression of a cassowary, and the beak that can crack a femur. The terror bird didn't just chase prey, they ran it down. Their leg bones were thick and dense, designed to absorb the shock of running on hard plains. Some scientists believe that they could use their legs as weapons. A kick from a 300-pound bird moving at 40 miles per hour would probably shatter the ribcage of a wolf or a small horse, right? It would be like getting hit by a motorcycle. The prey they hunted tells us a lot about the world that they lived in. This was the golden age of weird mammals. The horses of this era were not the Clydesdales or Mustangs we see today. They were small, often forest-dwelling browsers. Genera like Mesohippus and Hipparion were roughly the size of a large dog or a deer. They were fast, agile, and skittish. The evolution of the horse is actually tied directly to the terror birds. Horses became faster because they were being eaten. The ones that couldn't outrun a Kelenken didn't survive to pass on their genes. The lightning-fast speed of modern horses is a direct response to millions of years of terror imposed by these birds. It was an evolutionary arms race. The horses developed longer legs and single hooves for efficiency. The birds developed more power and terrifying agility. But the terror birds had another secret weapon: sound. We can reconstruct the inner ear structure of these birds from fossils. They were tuned to low frequencies. While we can't know exactly what they sounded like, we can look to their closest living relatives for clues: the red-legged seraima. The seraima is a small predatory bird in South America today. It barely reaches your knee. But when it screams, it sounds like a maniacal laugh or a barking dog. It's terrifying. Now, scale that sound up to a creature that stands 10 feet tall, and you might get a picture. The terror bird likely communicated with deep, resonating booms that could travel for miles across the grasslands. It would have been a sound that triggered instinctive panic in every mammal that heard it. It was the sound of the inevitable. The reign of the terror birds reached its peak in South America. For tens of millions of years, this continent was isolated from the rest of the world by the ocean. It was a laboratory of evolution. Without competition from bears, wolves, or large cats, the birds became the undisputed kings. They filled every predatory niche. There were small fox-sized terror birds that hunted rodents, there were medium-sized ones that hunted sheep-sized herbivores, and then there were giants, the lords of the plains, that hunted everything else. But then something happened that changed the course of history. The Earth itself moved. About 3 million years ago, volcanic activity caused the Isthmus of Panama to rise from the sea. A land bridge formed connecting South America to North America. This triggered one of the most chaotic events in biological history: the Great American Biotic Interchange. Animals from the north moved south and animals from the south moved north, right? Usually when two ecosystems collide, one of them collapses. And for the terror birds, this was the ultimate test. For the first time, they faced the mammalian killing machines that had evolved in the north. They met the saber-toothed cat, the smilodon, they met the direwolf, and they met the short-faced bear. Most South American predators were wiped out by the invaders, but the terror bird was different. The terror bird didn't just survive, it invaded back. Titanis wallari is the proof of this conquest. Titanis is the only species of terror bird found in North America. It crossed the bridge, it looked at the saber-toothed cats and the wolves, and it didn't back down. It marched right into Texas and to Florida and staked its claim. This period represents a clash of titans that is hard to even visualize. Imagine the scene. A pack of wolves surrounding a Titanis. The wolves are used to biting the legs of bison or mammoths. They try to circle the bird. But the bird has 360-degree awareness. Its large eyes are positioned for binocular vision, depth perception. It tracks the wolves with jerky, robotic movements of its head. The wolf lunges. The Titanis doesn't bite, it kicks. The talons on its feet are not sharp like an eagle's, but they are heavy. The kick connects with the wolf's skull, crushing it instantly. Another wolf tries to attack from the side. The bird pivots on one leg, swinging its massive head, and the axe beak slams down. The wolf's back is broken. The terror bird was a nightmare for mammals because it fought differently. Mammals grapple, they bite and hold, they use weight and wrestling. The terror bird fought with strikes. It was a boxer. It kept its distance, using its long reach, delivering devastating blows, and then just pulling back. It was hit-and-run warfare. There is also a controversial theory about Titanis that makes it even more frightening. Most terror birds had tiny, useless wings like a T-Rex's arms. But the bones of the Titanis wing are actually different. They're stronger, and the joint suggests a unique range of motion. Some paleontologists have theorized that Titanis actually had clawed fingers on its wings, not for flying, but for grasping. Imagine an 8-foot bird that can not only outrun a horse and axe murder a wolf, but also has arms with meat hook claws to manipulate its prey. While this theory is debated, the very possibility highlights how distinct and alien these creatures were compared to modern birds. So if they were such perfect killing machines, why aren't they here today? Why don't we have to worry about a Titanis running down our car on the highway? The extinction of the terror bird is a mystery that scientists are still unraveling. It wasn't a single event like the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. It was a slow and agonizing squeeze. The first factor was the climate. The world was getting colder and drier. The dense forests and tall grasslands where terror birds excelled were changing. These birds were ambush predators. They needed cover to get close to horses before launching their sprint. As the world turned into open, short grass steppes, the horses could see them coming from miles away. The horses got faster, and the birds just couldn't keep up. The second factor was biological vulnerability. Being a top predator is a precarious existence. You need a lot of meat to fuel a 300-pound body. If the population of prey drops even slightly, the predator starves. But the biggest weakness of the terror bird was its children. Terror birds were ground nesters. They laid their eggs on the forest floor. In the isolated world of South America, this was fine. But when the Great Interchange happened, new, small predators entered the system. Coatis, raccoons, and weasels from North America flooded south. And these animals were small, smart, and hungry. A Titanis could kill a saber-toothed cat, but it couldn't stop 100 small mammals from sneaking into its nest at night while it slept. The eggs were defenseless. The chicks were vulnerable. The mammals didn't beat the terror birds in a fair fight, it seems. They ate them before they were born. By 2 million years ago, the reign was largely over. The last of the terror birds faded into the fossil record, and the experiment of avian dominance had ended. The mammals had won. However, their legacy remains. If you look at a red-legged saraima in a zoo today, watch how it handles a rubber snake or a lizard. It grabs the reptile in its beak, raises it high in the air, and slams it violently against a rock. It does this over and over again until the prey is a pulp. That motion, that violent vertical slam, is an echo. It is the same motion that Kelenken used to crack the skulls of ancient horses. The terror birds prove that the dominance of mammals was not guaranteed. For 60 million years, we were the underdogs. We were the prey. And on the plains of prehistoric America, The most terrifying sound wasn't the roar of a lion, it was the swift, thundering footsteps of a bird that had forgotten how to fly, but had learned exactly how to kill. And hey, I'll catch you next time.